The crystal chandelier caught the afternoon light and scattered it across the white marble floor like broken promises. Natasha stood perfectly still in the foyer of the mansion, her hands clasped in front of her blue silk dress, watching her husband Julian pace back and forth. 5 years of marriage, and she'd never seen him look at her with such cold dismissal. "You don't understand, do you?" Julian said, his voice sharp with frustration. "Simone is back. She never should have left. We belong together." Natasha felt something inside her grow very quiet and very calm. She'd suspected this for weeks now, ever since she'd seen the text messages lighting up his phone at midnight. Simone. His college girlfriend. The one he'd called his soulmate before she'd moved to Paris for her career. "I see," Natasha said softly. Julian stopped pacing and stared at her. "That's it? That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You could fight for us. You could try. But you won't, will you? Because you've been coasting on my money for 5 years. You've lived in this house, spent my credit cards, attended parties on my arm. Without me, you're nothing." The words hung in the air between them. Natasha looked around the foyer, at the expensive art on the walls, the imported furniture, the life she'd helped build. Not just with money but with strategy, with planning, with the kind of behind-the-scenes work that no one noticed because she'd never asked for credit. "You really believe that?" she said quietly. "I know it," Julian replied. "You won't last a week on your own. You'll be back here, begging me to reconsider, and maybe by then I'll have changed my mind about Simone." Natasha reached into her purse and pulled out her key ring. Slowly, deliberately, she removed the house key, the car keys for the vehicles Julian had purchased, the key to his office building. She placed them one by one on the marble console table by the door. "What are you doing?" Julian asked, his voice uncertain for the first time. "Leaving," Natasha said. She walked to the coat closet and pulled out her red wool coat, the one she'd bought with her own money from her consulting work, back before Julian had insisted she didn't need to work anymore. Just like that. Just like that. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Julian didn't move to stop her. He stood there, smug and certain, believing she would crack before she even made it to the end of the driveway. "You'll be back," he called after her. "By this time next week, you'll realize what a mistake you've made." Natasha paused at the door and looked back at him. "Goodbye, Julian." She walked out into the crisp October afternoon. Her car, a modest sedan she'd kept from before their marriage, was parked at the side of the circular driveway. Julian had always hated that she refused to get rid of it, said it looked cheap next to his luxury vehicles. But she'd kept it, maintained it, kept it registered in her name alone. As she drove away from the mansion, she didn't look back. Not once. Her phone started ringing before she'd even reached the main road. Julian's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call and kept driving. The hotel she checked into was nice but not extravagant. A clean room with a comfortable bed and a desk where she could work. The moment the door closed behind her, Natasha set her purse down and pulled out her laptop. She had work to do. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Email after email, each one carefully worded, each one setting pieces in motion that Julian couldn't even begin to imagine. She called her friend Beverly, who answered on the first ring. "It's time," Natasha said simply. "Are you sure?" Beverly asked, concern clear in her voice. "I'm sure. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine." "Okay. I'll start pulling the documents we discussed. This is going to get complicated, Nat." "I know. But it's necessary." After she hung up, Natasha sat back and closed her eyes. She thought about the girl she'd been when she met Julian. 25 years old, fresh out of graduate school with her PhD in financial engineering. She'd been working as a consultant, building a reputation, making her own money. Julian had swept her off her feet with his charm, his confidence, his seemingly endless resources. She'd loved him, truly loved him. And she'd believed he loved her too. But somewhere along the way, Julian had stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as an accessory. He'd insisted she stop working, said his wife didn't need a job. He'd introduced her at parties as, "my beautiful wife," but never mentioned her education or her accomplishments. He'd made her invisible while keeping her on display. And she'd let him. Because she'd loved him. Because she'd wanted to make him happy. Because she'd convinced herself that supporting him was enough. But it hadn't been enough for Julian. He'd still wanted Simone. Natasha's phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. She answered it. "Mrs. Sterling?" a man's voice asked. She almost corrected him, almost said she'd be dropping that name soon, but instead she just said, "Yes." This is Theodore Garrett. I work with your father-in-law Richard at Sterling Enterprises. I'm sorry to bother you, but we're having some issues accessing certain accounts, and we noticed your signature is required on several documents. Would you be able to come by the office tomorrow? Natasha smiled, though no one could see it. I'm afraid that won't be possible. I understand if you're busy, but this is rather urgent. Perhaps later this week? Mr. Garrett, I'm no longer living at the Sterling residence. Any business matters will need to go through my attorney. I'll have him contact you. There was a long pause. I see. May I ask what this is about? You may ask Julian, Natasha said pleasantly. Have a good evening. She hung up and immediately called Leonard, her lawyer. He was a sharp man in his 50s who'd handled some consulting contracts for her years ago. When she'd first started having doubts about her marriage, she'd quietly retained him. Leonard, it's Natasha. I just left. Are you somewhere safe? Yes. And it's starting. I just got a call from Theodore Garrett at Sterling Enterprises. Leonard chuckled. That was faster than I expected. They must have tried to move money today. Are you ready for this? It's going to get intense. I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time. Okay. Don't answer any more calls from them directly. Everything goes through me now. And Natasha? You're doing the right thing. You built half that empire. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After they hung up, Natasha ordered room service and continued working on her laptop. She had lists to make, contacts to reach out to, opportunities to pursue. Her life was about to change dramatically, but for the first time in years she felt like she could breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Julian. This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults. She deleted it without responding. Another text came through moments later. You're being childish. I thought you were better than this. Delete. Simone and I are having dinner tonight. I just thought you should know. Delete. Natasha turned off her phone and opened the room service menu. She ordered a salad and a glass of wine, then went back to her laptop. Tomorrow she would start building her new life. Tonight she would simply enjoy the peace of not having to pretend anymore. The best part about Julian's ultimatum was that he thought he held all the power. He thought his money, his name, his connections were everything. He'd forgotten that Natasha had her own skills, her own intelligence, her own carefully laid plans. He'd forgotten that she'd been the one doing the real work all along. Outside her hotel window, the city lights began to flicker on as evening fell. Natasha looked out at them and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Oh. Natasha woke early the next morning, her mind already racing through the tasks ahead. She dressed in a green suit she'd purchased years ago, back when she still had her own career. It still fit perfectly. She pulled her hair into a neat bun and applied minimal makeup. Professional. Capable. Nothing like the decorative wife Julian had wanted her to be. Beverly met her at a small cafe 3 blocks from the hotel. Beverly was a tall woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. They'd been roommates in graduate school, bonding over late-night study sessions and a shared love of complex financial systems. You look good, Beverly said as Natasha slid into the booth across from her. Considering. I feel good, Natasha replied honestly. Is that strange? Not at all. You've been planning this exit for 2 years. It's probably a relief to finally execute it. Beverly pushed a folder across the table. Natasha opened it and began reviewing the documents inside. Contracts, partnership agreements, loan guarantees, patent filings, all bearing her signature alongside Julian's, or sometimes her signature alone. I pulled everything from the files you gave me access to, Beverly explained, keeping her voice low. You were right. You're not just listed as a spouse on these documents. You're listed as a partner, a guarantor, sometimes even as the primary consultant. Julian's father set it up this way for tax purposes, remember? They wanted to split the liability. But they forgot what that actually meant, Natasha said, studying a particularly interesting contract. If I'm a partner, I have say in business decisions. Exactly. And if you're a loan guarantor, the banks need your signature to make certain moves. Julian probably signed these papers without reading them, assuming his father and the lawyers had his interests protected. They did have his interests protected, Natasha said. Back when I was still cooperating. Her phone, which she'd turned back on that morning, was already filling with missed calls. 10 from Julian. 5 from Richard. 3 from Theodore. Even 1 from Patricia, Julian's mother. They're panicking, Beverly observed. Good. Let them panic for a while. They spent the next 2 hours going through every document, making lists, planning strategy. Natasha had consulting offers from 3 different companies, firms she'd quietly maintained relationships with over the years. She'd told Julian they were just friends from graduate school staying in touch. He'd never paid enough attention to realize they were business contacts. "I can start working next week," Natasha said. "The hotel is fine for now, but I'll need to find an apartment." "Already handled." Beverly pulled out another folder. "I found 3 options in your price range. All in good neighborhoods, all available for immediate occupancy. We can look at them this afternoon if you want." "You're amazing." "I'm efficient." "There's a difference." Beverly paused, her expression growing serious. "Nat, are you sure about the money? You could push for a bigger settlement. You contributed to that business. You deserve more than just walking away with what you came in with." "I don't want his money," Natasha said firmly. "I want what I earned through my own work. The consulting fees that I let them fold into the business accounts, the partnerships I negotiated, the contracts I structured. I want fair compensation for my labor, not alimony from a failed marriage. That's still going to be a substantial amount." "I know. And I'm going to fight for every penny of it. But I'm not going to be painted as some gold digger trying to steal from the Sterling family fortune. I'm a financial engineer who worked for 5 years without proper compensation because I was stupid enough to think love was payment enough." Beverly reached across the table and squeezed Natasha's hand. "You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. There's a difference." After their meeting, Natasha spent the afternoon looking at apartments. The third one was perfect. A loft in a converted warehouse building, with exposed brick walls and huge windows that let in streams of natural light. The bedroom was separated from the main living area by a partial wall, creating a sense of space without sacrificing privacy. The kitchen was small but functional. There was even a small office nook where she could work. "I'll take it," she told the landlord, a friendly woman named Ruth. "Wonderful. I'll need first month, last month, and security deposit. When can you move in?" "Today if possible." Ruth raised her eyebrows but nodded. "I can have the keys ready in 2 hours. Cash or check?" "Check." Natasha pulled out her personal checkbook, the one tied to an account Julian had never known about. She'd been depositing small amounts into it for years, money from freelance consulting work she'd done on the side. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started. While Ruth processed the paperwork, Natasha walked back through the loft, imagining how she'd furnish it. Simple. Modern. Nothing like the ornate, expensive furniture Julian had insisted on. This would be her space, reflecting her taste, filled with things she chose. Her phone rang again. Richard this time. She declined the call and texted Leonard instead. "They're getting aggressive. How long should I wait?" His response came quickly. "Let them sweat until tomorrow. Then we'll set up a meeting. Make them come to you." That evening, Natasha bought a few basic necessities, including an air mattress and some bedding. She spent her first night in her new loft lying on the temporary bed, staring up at the exposed beams of the ceiling, feeling more at peace than she had in years. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian was having a very different evening. He tried calling Natasha 17 times. All of his calls went to voicemail. His text messages were delivered but not read. It was like she'd simply vanished from his life, and the completeness of her disappearance unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Simone had come over for dinner as planned, but the evening had been awkward. She kept asking questions about his work, about his family's wealth, about the future. Questions that Julian suddenly realized had nothing to do with him and everything to do with his bank account. "Your father called me today," Simone said over dessert. "He seemed upset. Is everything okay with the business?" "It's fine," Julian said shortly. "Just some administrative issues. He mentioned something about your wife. Ex-wife, I mean. Or soon-to-be ex-wife." Simone laughed, but it sounded forced. "Is she causing problems?" "Natasha isn't causing problems. She's just being difficult about signing some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" Julian didn't want to explain that he didn't actually know. His father had called him in a rage earlier, demanding to know where Natasha was and why she wasn't answering her phone. Something about frozen accounts and delayed contracts. Julian had assumed it was just his father being dramatic. "Business stuff," he said vaguely. "Nothing important." But later that night, after Simone had left, Julian stood in his bedroom, in the mansion that suddenly felt too large and too empty, and felt the first stirrings of real concern. Natasha had always been so agreeable, so accommodating. She'd supported every decision he made, had been there for every family dinner, had smiled through every boring business function. He'd assumed that was just who she was. Passive. Dependent. grateful for the life he'd given her. But the woman who had calmly placed her keys on the counter and walked out without a single tear or argument, that wasn't the Natasha he thought he knew. Julian picked up his phone and tried calling her again. Voicemail. Natasha, this is getting ridiculous. Whatever you're trying to prove, you've made your point. Call me back so we can sort this out like adults. He hung up and paced his bedroom. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would track her down and make her see reason. She'd probably gone to stay with a friend or checked into some cheap hotel. She'd be ready to talk by now, ready to realize that leaving had been a mistake. Julian fell asleep believing this, believing he still had control of the situation. He had no idea that the foundation of his entire life was already crumbling beneath him. Richard Sterling sat in his office at Sterling Enterprises, his face red with fury and stress. Theodore sat across from him, looking equally troubled. Between them on the desk were stacks of documents, all flagged with sticky notes marking problems. Explain to me again how this happened, Richard demanded. Theodore sighed. 18 months ago, when we restructured the European division, we needed someone to co-sign the loan agreements. You suggested Natasha because having a spouse as a guarantor gave us better terms. And she's listed as a full guarantor on $12 million in credit lines. The banks need her signature to extend or modify any of those terms. Without her cooperation, we're locked in at current interest rates, which are significantly higher than what we could negotiate now. Richard cursed under his breath. What else? The Patterson account. Remember how we landed that contract 3 years ago? It turns out Natasha was the one who structured the entire deal. She's listed as the consultant of record. They've been asking to renegotiate terms, but legally they need to work with her because she's the one who created the original agreement. Why wasn't I told about this? You were. It's in the files. But at the time, Natasha was cooperative, so it didn't matter who was listed where. She signed whatever we needed when we needed it. Richard stood and walked to his window looking out over the city. And now Julian has driven her away by chasing after that Simone woman. It appears so. My son is an idiot. Theodore didn't argue. Richard's phone rang. He answered it to find his banker on the other line, asking about the status of several accounts. The conversation lasted 10 minutes and left Richard even more agitated than before. The credit line for the new acquisition is frozen, he told Theodore after hanging up. The bank won't move forward without all guarantors present to sign the new terms. We need Natasha in this office by the end of the week, or we're going to lose the deal entirely. I've tried calling her. She's not answering. Then try harder. But trying harder didn't work. Natasha's phone went straight to voicemail. Her email address bounced back automated responses saying she was away from her computer. The few mutual acquaintances they reached out to claimed not to know where she was. She had simply disappeared. By Wednesday afternoon, Julian was summoned to his father's office. The moment he walked in, he knew he was in trouble. Sit down, Richard said, his voice cold. Julian sat, suddenly feeling like a child being called to the principal's office. Do you have any idea what you've done? Richard asked. I ended my marriage. That's between Natasha and me. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've potentially destroyed this company. Julian blinked. What are you talking about? Richard spent the next 20 minutes explaining exactly what he was talking about. The frozen credit lines. The stalled contracts. The partnership agreements that required Natasha's input. The consulting fees that had been redirected into company accounts, creating tax complications that now needed her signature to resolve. She's not just your wife, Julian. She's been working as an uncredited consultant for this company for 5 years. And you just threw her away for some woman who left you once already. Simone didn't leave me. She had a career opportunity. And now she's back because she heard you were wealthy. Are you really that blind? Julian felt his face grow hot. That's not true. Isn't it? Theodore did some checking. Simone's modeling career in Paris failed. She's been back in the States for 6 months working retail. Then she hears through the grapevine that you married well, and suddenly she's reaching out? You don't find that suspicious? Julian stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down. Richard roared. You're going to sit there and listen because you've made a mess that affects more than just you. Your mother is embarrassed. Our business partners are concerned. And our lawyers are telling me that Natasha has every right to demand compensation for 5 years of unpaid consulting work. She lived in my house. She spent my money. That's compensation. You really believe that, don't you? You think providing housing and spending money is equivalent to a PhD-level financial engineer's consulting fees? Richard shook his head. You're more foolish than I thought. What do you want me to do? I want you to find your wife, apologize for being an ungrateful idiot, and convince her to come back so we can sort this mess out properly. She's not going to come back. Then convince her to at least cooperate with the business matters. Offer her whatever she wants. But convincing Natasha to do anything proved impossible, because no one could find her. Julian drove to the hotel where her credit card had been used, but she'd already checked out. He tried calling her friends from college, but none of them would tell him anything. He even hired a private investigator, who reported back that Natasha had been exceptionally careful about covering her tracks. Patricia, Julian's mother, tried a softer approach. She reached out to Natasha through a mutual acquaintance, requesting a lunch meeting. The message came back politely declined. She doesn't want to talk to any of us, Patricia told her son over dinner that Thursday evening. Can you blame her? I gave her everything, Julian said defensively. You gave her things. That's not the same as everything. Patricia set down her fork and looked at her son seriously. Julian, I love you. But you made a terrible mistake. Natasha was good for you. She was smart, kind, and she genuinely cared about this family. And you threw her away the moment something shinier came along. Simone isn't shinier. We have history. You have history with a woman who left you for her career and only came back when your career was successful. That should tell you everything you need to know. Julian pushed his plate away, suddenly not hungry. Why is everyone acting like I'm the villain here? I'm allowed to want to be with someone I love. Are you in love with Simone? Or are you in love with the idea of Simone? The girl you remember from college who made you feel important? Julian didn't answer. By Friday morning, Sterling Enterprises was in full crisis mode. 2 major deals had fallen through because of the documentation problems. The banks were threatening to call in certain loans if all guarantors didn't sign updated agreements by the end of the month. Investors were asking questions. Stock prices were starting to dip. And through it all, Natasha remained unreachable, unmoved, and apparently unconcerned with the chaos she'd left behind. Leonard, her lawyer, finally reached out on Friday afternoon with a brief message. His client would agree to a meeting the following Monday at 2 p.m. Location to be determined. All parties should bring their legal representation. Richard immediately agreed. He had no other choice. Julian, meanwhile, spent the weekend with Simone, trying to ignore the constant calls from his father and the growing certainty that he'd made a mistake he couldn't fix. On Sunday evening, he sat in his study looking at the wedding photos on his desk. Natasha in her white dress, smiling genuinely at the camera. Natasha laughing at something he'd said. Natasha looking at him like he was the most important person in the world. When had she stopped looking at him like that? When had her smiles become polite instead of genuine? When had he stopped noticing? Julian picked up his phone and tried calling her one more time. The call went straight to voicemail just like all the others. Natasha, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just about the business stuff but about everything. I took you for granted. I stopped seeing you as a partner and started seeing you as just part of my life like furniture or decor. That was wrong. I was wrong. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to explain. I'd like to try to fix this. He hung up and sat in the dark study, surrounded by the trappings of success, feeling emptier than he'd ever felt in his life. Across the city, Natasha listened to the voicemail while unpacking boxes in her new loft. She listened to Julian's apology, heard the genuine regret in his voice, and felt absolutely nothing. That was when she knew she'd truly moved on. She deleted the message and went back to arranging her bookshelf, placing her academic texts and professional journals in neat rows. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting, but it wouldn't change anything. She'd already decided what she wanted, and it had nothing to do with Julian or his regrets. She had her own future to build. 5 years earlier, on a bright spring afternoon, Natasha walked into a networking event for financial professionals with her friend Beverly. At 25, she was proud of what she'd accomplished. Her PhD dissertation on risk assessment and emerging markets had been published in 2 prestigious journals. She had 3 consulting contracts and was building a reputation as someone who could see patterns others missed. There's an open bar, Beverly said, steering them toward the refreshments. Let's get a drink before the boring speeches start. That's where Natasha met Julian. He was standing by the bar, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit, clearly dragged there by his father for networking purposes. When she accidentally bumped into him while reaching for a glass of wine, he'd smiled at her in a way that made her forget about the speeches entirely. I'm Julian, he said, offering his hand. Natasha. They talked for 2 hours, ignoring the event around them. He told her about working in his father's company, about feeling like he'd never live up to expectations. She told him about her research, about her dreams of revolutionizing how companies assessed international investments. He listened like her words were the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. 3 months later they were engaged. 6 months after that they were married. In those early days, Natasha had been so happy. Julian seemed proud of her work. He introduced her to his business associates as my brilliant wife. He asked her opinion on deals his company was considering. He made her feel valued. The shift happened gradually, so slowly she didn't notice until it was already complete. First, he suggested she work from home instead of maintaining her office downtown. We barely see each other, he said. Wouldn't it be nice to have more time together? Then he started interrupting her work calls. Can't that wait? I thought we could have lunch. Always small things, always reasonable requests, always chipping away at her professional boundaries. His mother Patricia started making comments at family dinners. It's so nice that you're willing to work, dear, but don't you want to think about children? A career is fine, but family is what really matters. Richard, Julian's father, was more direct. Natasha, we're restructuring the European division. Your expertise would be invaluable. Could you take a look at these contracts? She'd said yes because she loved Julian and wanted to help his family. That first consultation led to another, then another. Soon she was spending 20 hours a week on Sterling Enterprises business, but none of it was officially recognized. Richard would thank her privately, sometimes send flowers. But there were no consulting contracts, no fees, no credit for her work. Why would we need a formal contract? Julian had said when she brought it up. Your family. We help each other out. And because she loved him, because she wanted to be a good wife, because she'd been raised to believe that marriage meant partnership and sacrifice, Natasha had agreed. She let her independent consulting contracts lapse. She closed her downtown office. She stopped publishing papers. She became Mrs. Julian Sterling, beautiful wife of a wealthy man, present at all the right parties and charity events, smiling at all the right times. But she never stopped being smart. She never stopped paying attention. Every contract she reviewed for Sterling Enterprises she kept copies of. Every deal she structured she documented thoroughly. Every conversation where Richard or Theodore asked her opinion, she followed up with detailed emails summarizing her recommendations. She did this partly out of habit, the discipline of an academic trained to document everything. But she also did it out of instinct, some part of her recognizing that her contributions were being erased even as she made them. 2 years into her marriage, Natasha found the first credit card statement with charges she didn't recognize. Expensive dinners at restaurants she'd never been to. Hotel rooms in cities Julian had supposedly visited for business alone. She confronted him and he'd been so apologetic, so regretful. It was a colleague, he said. A stupid mistake. It meant nothing. She believed him because she wanted to. Because divorce felt like failure. Because she loved the man she'd married, even if that man seemed to be disappearing. But after that, Natasha started preparing. Quietly. Carefully. She opened a bank account Julian didn't know about. She kept her old car registered in her name. She maintained contact with Beverly and other professional friends, even when Julian complained about her spending time with people from her old life. And she started consulting again, secretly. Small projects she could do online, clients she'd worked with before who were happy to have her expertise. She told Julian she was volunteering for charity work, and he'd been pleased about that, had even bragged to his parents about his wife's generous spirit. The money from these secret consulting jobs went into her private account. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Insurance against a future she hoped would never come. Then Simone came back. Natasha had known about Simone from the beginning. Julian had told her all about his college girlfriend, the one who broke his heart by choosing her career over their relationship. He'd made it sound like ancient history, a youthful romance that had no bearing on their life together. But when Simone reached out to Julian through social media, Natasha watched her husband's face light up in a way it hadn't lit up for her in years. She watched him start spending hours on his phone, texting and smiling. She watched him make excuses to stay late at work, to take business trips that didn't appear on any company calendar. And she knew. Natasha could have fought for her marriage. She could have demanded Julian choose, could have threatened and cried and made scenes. But she'd learned something important during her years of academic research. You can't force someone to value what they don't appreciate. You can't make someone love you if they've decided to love someone else. So instead she prepared. She gathered documents. She made plans. She consulted with Leonard, the lawyer who'd handled her contracts before she married. She worked with Beverly to understand exactly what her financial situation would be post-divorce. And when Julian finally came home and told her he wanted out, that he'd never stopped loving Simone, that Natasha wouldn't survive a week without him, she was ready. She'd been ready for a year. Now, sitting in her new loft, surrounded by boxes of books and the life she was rebuilding, Natasha didn't regret her marriage. It had taught her valuable lessons. It had shown her that intelligence and love weren't enough if you let someone make you invisible. It had taught her that financial independence wasn't just important, it was essential. Most importantly, it had taught her that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email. One of her old clients, a mid-sized investment firm, wanted to know if she was available for a consultation on a new international expansion. The project would take 6 months and pay enough to cover a year of her expenses. Natasha typed out a response, agreeing to discuss terms. Then she went back to unpacking, organizing her new life with the same careful attention she'd once given to saving her marriage. The difference was that now she was investing in something that would actually appreciate herself. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and cold wind. Leonard picked Natasha up at her loft at noon, giving her time to review all the documents one last time before their 2 p.m. meeting. "You look ready," he said as she settled into his car. "I am." Natasha wore a blue suit, professional and confident. Her hair was styled neatly, her makeup minimal. She looked like what she was, a successful businesswoman about to negotiate terms. "Remember, we're not here to destroy anyone. We're here to get fair compensation for your work and to establish clear boundaries going forward." "I know. Richard is going to try to intimidate you. Theodore will try to guilt you. Julian will probably try to appeal to your emotions. None of that will work." Leonard smiled. "I believe you." The meeting was held at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown office building that Leonard had rented for the afternoon. Natasha arrived first, taking a seat at the head of the table. She arranged her documents in neat stacks, her laptop open in front of her. When Richard walked in with Theodore and their lawyer, a severe man named Mitchell, she didn't stand. She simply nodded in greeting. "Natasha," Richard said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Mr. Sterling." Julian arrived last, looking tired and uncertain. He tried to catch Natasha's eye, but she focused on her laptop screen, reviewing notes. Once everyone was seated, Leonard began. "My client has agreed to this meeting to discuss resolving several business entanglements between herself and Sterling Enterprises. Before we begin, I want to make it clear that this is not a social call. This is a business negotiation." "We understand," Mitchell said. "Our clients are prepared to be reasonable." "Good. Then let's start with the loan guarantees." "Mrs. Sterling, excuse me, Dr. Harper," Leonard corrected himself, using Natasha's maiden name, "is listed as a guarantor on approximately $12 million in various credit lines and loans. She's willing to sign releases for these guarantees in exchange for appropriate compensation." Richard's face reddened. "Compensation? She's family. Those guarantees were done as a favor." "A favor that created legal liability for my client," Leonard replied smoothly. "Banking regulations require all guarantors to be compensated, even family members, unless they're direct beneficiaries of the loans. Dr. Harper received no benefit from these credit lines. She lived in our son's house," Richard argued, "which has no bearing on business loan guarantees." Leonard slid a document across the table. "This is a summary of standard consulting fees for financial engineers at Dr. Harper's level of education and experience. As you can see, 5 years of the kind of work she performed for Sterling Enterprises would typically be compensated at roughly $800,000, plus benefits." The room went silent. Julian spoke for the first time. "That's ridiculous. Natasha never asked for payment. Because she believed she was contributing to a family business as a spouse," Leonard said. "However, now that the marriage is ending, those contributions need to be properly valued and compensated." Theodore leaned forward. "Even if we agreed to some compensation, which I'm not saying we do, that number is vastly inflated." Natasha spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clear. "Is it? Let's review. The Patterson account, which generates $2 million annually in revenue. I structured that entire deal. The European division restructuring saved Sterling Enterprises approximately $5 million in the first year alone. I designed that. The risk assessment protocols you now use company-wide, preventing 3 potentially disastrous investments in the past 2 years. Those were based on my doctoral research." She pulled out a document and slid it across the table. This is a conservative estimate of the value I added to Sterling Enterprises over 5 years. If you'd like to dispute these numbers, I'm happy to have an independent accounting firm review everything. Mitchell picked up the document and started reading, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Furthermore, Natasha continued, I'm prepared to be reasonable about the loan guarantees. I don't want to disrupt your business operations. But I do want fair compensation for the work I did and the liability I assumed. If you're not willing to negotiate in good faith, I'm prepared to let the banks know that I'm disputing my status as a guarantor due to lack of compensation. That will freeze your credit lines indefinitely while the matter is litigated. You wouldn't, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. I would. I spent 5 years being accommodating, being helpful, being invisible. I'm done with that now. Julian stood abruptly. Can I talk to you? Alone. No, Natasha said simply. Please. Just 5 minutes. Anything you need to say to my client can be said in front of legal counsel, Leonard interrupted. Julian looked at Natasha with something like desperation. This isn't about the money, is it? You're doing this to punish me. Natasha met his eyes steadily. This is absolutely about the money. It's about being fairly compensated for professional work I performed. The fact that you see it as punishment says everything about how you valued my contributions during our marriage. I valued you. You valued having a beautiful wife who made you look good at parties. You never valued the actual work I did. Natasha turned back to Richard and Mitchell. Gentlemen, my lawyer has prepared a settlement offer. It includes compensation for past consulting work, release of all loan guarantees, and dissolution of any business entanglements. In exchange, I'm willing to sign new contracts for any future consulting work Sterling Enterprises requires at market rates. This offer is good for 48 hours. She stood, gathering her documents. Leonard stood with her. Wait, Richard said. We need time to review all of this with our accountants. You have 48 hours, Natasha repeated. After that, I start filing formal disputes with the banks and notifying your business partners that I'm contesting the validity of contracts I signed under duress as an uncompensated consultant. Under duress? Theodore sputtered. That's absurd. Is it? I was pressured by my then-husband and his family to provide professional services without compensation under the guise of family obligation. I have emails, text messages, and recorded conversations documenting this pressure. If you want to test my claims in court, I'm willing to do that. But it would be expensive, time-consuming, and very public. Mitchell looked at Richard. We need to talk to our clients privately. Of course, Leonard said pleasantly. We'll step outside. In the hallway, Leonard grinned at Natasha. You were perfect. Calm, professional, utterly ruthless. I wasn't ruthless. I was fair. In business, fair is ruthless. They expected you to be emotional, to be guilt-tripped into accepting far less than you deserve. Instead, you hit them with hard numbers and legal reality. Natasha's hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline of confrontation finally hitting her. Do you think they'll accept the offer? They'd be fools not to. But even if they don't, you've established your position. They know now that you're serious, that you're not going to be pushed around. 20 minutes later, Mitchell emerged and called them back inside. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years. Julian was staring at the table. Theodore was writing notes furiously. We need more than 48 hours, Mitchell said. This is complex. 72 hours, Leonard counteroffered. But that's final. Agreed. We'll have a response by Thursday afternoon. As the meeting broke up, Julian tried once more to approach Natasha. She held up a hand, stopping him. Don't, she said quietly. Whatever you want to say, whatever apologies you think you owe me, I don't want to hear them right now. Maybe later, after all of this is settled. But not now. I never meant for things to end like this. You ended them the day you told me I was nothing without you. You just didn't realize what you were ending. She walked out of the conference room, out of the building, into the cold afternoon air. Leonard walked beside her, a protective presence. How do you feel? He asked. Natasha took a deep breath. Free. Scared. Relieved. Angry. All of it at once. That's normal. You just confronted the people who took advantage of you for years. Of course you're feeling everything. In his car, driving back to her loft, Natasha watched the city pass by outside her window. Somewhere in that tangle of buildings and streets, her old life was continuing without her. Julian was probably with Simone, trying to explain why his soon-to-be ex-wife was causing so much trouble. Richard was probably calculating how much Natasha's demands would cost. Patricia was probably planning how to save face at the next charity event. And Natasha found that she didn't care about any of it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Beverly. "How did it go?" "Tell you over dinner," Natasha replied. 7 p.m.? "I'll bring wine." That evening, sitting in her new loft with Beverly eating takeout and drinking wine, Natasha finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd done. "I stood up to them," she said, still slightly amazed by it. "I actually did it." "You were always going to do it," Beverly said. "You just needed to be ready." "I was scared they'd talk me out of it. That Richard would make me feel guilty, or Julian would say something that would make me remember why I loved him. But they didn't. No. Because I don't love who Julian became. I love who I thought he was, who he was when we first met. That person doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did." Beverly raised her glass. "To new beginnings. To standing up for yourself. To getting what you deserve." They clinked glasses and Natasha felt something settle inside her. A sense of rightness, of being on the correct path even if she didn't know exactly where it led. Her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. She declined the call and went back to her dinner, her wine, her friend, and her future. The past could wait 72 hours for her response. Right now she was busy living. Wednesday morning, Natasha met with her first official client since leaving Julian. The meeting was at a coffee shop near her loft, casual but professional. Marcus, no, she needed different names. Dominic, no, that was for later. Carter Jennings ran a mid-sized investment firm that specialized in international markets. "Dr. Harper, thank you for meeting with me," Carter said, shaking her hand. He was in his early 40s, professional but not stuffy. "I've been following your work since your dissertation was published. When I heard through the grapevine that you might be available for consulting, I knew I had to reach out." "I appreciate that," Natasha said. "What kind of project do you have in mind?" They spent 2 hours discussing his firm's planned expansion into Southeast Asian markets. Natasha found herself energized by the conversation, her mind engaging with complex problems in ways it hadn't in years. This was what she'd missed during her marriage. The intellectual challenge. The professional respect. Being valued for her expertise instead of just her appearance. "I'd like to offer you a 6-month contract," Carter said as their meeting wound down. "We can discuss terms, but I want you to know that we're prepared to pay competitive rates for someone of your caliber." "I'd like that. Have your legal team send over a contract proposal, and my lawyer will review it." After Carter left, Natasha sat in the coffee shop, reviewing her notes from the meeting. Her phone rang. Her brother Antoine. "Hey sis, Beverly told me what happened. Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to worry you," Natasha said. "And I had it handled." "You always have it handled. That's the problem. You don't let people help you." Antoine was 3 years older than Natasha, an architect with his own firm in the city. They'd always been close, but during her marriage, Natasha had drifted away from family gatherings, always making excuses about Julian's schedule or sterling family obligations. "I'm sorry I haven't been around much," she said. "I'm just glad you finally left that guy. I never liked him." "You could have said something. Would you have listened?" Natasha laughed. "Probably not." "Exactly. So I waited. And now I'm saying it, I'm proud of you. Not many people have the guts to walk away from wealth and comfort because they deserve better. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being invisible." "That's the same thing." They made plans to have dinner on Friday. Antoine offered to help her furnish her new loft. "I know some people who can get you good deals on furniture. Nothing from my wealthy ex-brother-in-law's usual stores. Real pieces with character." "I'd like that." After hanging up, Natasha spent the rest of the day working on her laptop in the coffee shop. She reviewed contracts, responded to emails, and started drafting a proposal for another potential client. The work felt good. Purposeful. Like she was rebuilding not just her career but her sense of self. That evening she got a call from Leonard. "They've responded early," he said. "They're accepting most of our terms." Natasha's heart raced. Most? They're quibbling over some minor points, but the major elements are agreed to. The compensation amount, release of guarantees, dissolution of business ties. They want to spread the payment over 2 years instead of one lump sum, which actually works in your favor for tax purposes. What do they want in return? Confidentiality. They don't want you discussing the settlement publicly or with their business partners. Standard stuff. I can agree to that. I'm not interested in destroying them. I just want what's fair. Then we'll finalize everything by Friday. Natasha, you should be proud. You stood your ground and won. After the call ended, Natasha stood at her loft windows, looking out over the city lights. She'd won. The words didn't feel real yet. All those years of being undervalued, of having her work dismissed as just helping family, of being invisible. And now, with a few strategic moves and the courage to stand up for herself, she'd won. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Can we please talk? Not about the business stuff. About us. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. There is no us anymore. There's you, there's me, and there's lawyers handling the business. That's all. His response came quickly. I miss you. Natasha deleted the message without responding. She'd spent enough time worrying about Julian's feelings. It was time to focus on her own. Thursday, Natasha met with Antoine at a furniture warehouse he knew. The owner, a cheerful woman named Helen, showed them around. I want simple, Natasha explained. Modern but comfortable. Nothing that screams expensive. Just quality pieces that feel like home. They picked out a gray sofa, a dining table with matching chairs, a bed frame in dark wood. Helen offered to deliver everything that weekend. Your brother's been talking about you, Helen said while they finalized the order. Says you're some kind of financial genius. Natasha laughed. I'm a consultant. That's all. That's not all, Antoine corrected. You just negotiated a settlement that probably has some very wealthy people reconsidering their assumptions about trophy wives. I was never a trophy wife. I know that. You know that. But Julian treated you like one and his family allowed it. That's what matters. After leaving the warehouse, Antoine took Natasha to lunch at a small Ethiopian restaurant in his neighborhood. I've been thinking, he said over shared platters of food. You should start your own firm. Not just freelance consulting. An actual business. That's a big step. You have the expertise. You have the connections. And from what Beverly tells me, you're about to have the capital. Why work for other people when you could be building something of your own? Natasha considered it. Her own firm. Her name on the door. Complete autonomy over which projects to take, which clients to work with. It was appealing but also terrifying. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. That evening, Leonard called with news that the settlement was finalized. Papers would be signed on Friday morning. The first payment would be in her account by Monday. How do you feel? He asked. Like I can breathe again. Good. That's what freedom feels like. Friday morning, Natasha dressed in her green suit again. Lucky green. She met Leonard at his office and they went through the final documents together. Everything was in order. Everything was fair. She signed her name on line after line, officially ending her entanglement with Sterling Enterprises. When it was done, Leonard shook her hand. Congratulations, Dr. Harper. You're officially free. Free. The word resonated through her like a bell. She was free. Free from Julian, from his family's expectations, from the role she'd been playing for so long. Free to be who she actually was. That afternoon, she met Beverly for coffee. It's done, Natasha announced. Beverly hugged her tightly. I'm so proud of you. Do you know what you're going to do next? Carter's firm wants me for 6 months. That'll give me steady income while I figure out the rest. And Antoine thinks I should start my own company. He's right. You should. Maybe. I need to think about it. But even as she said it, Natasha felt the idea taking root. Her own firm. Independence not just from Julian but from working for anyone else. Building something that was entirely hers. That weekend, with Antoine's help, she furnished her loft. The gray sofa fit perfectly against the exposed brick wall. The dining table sat beneath one of the large windows, catching afternoon light. Her bed, dressed in simple white linens, felt like a fresh start. Sunday evening, she sat on her new sofa with a glass of wine, looking around at her space. It was modest compared to the mansion. The furniture was nice but not extravagant. The view was of other buildings, not manicured gardens. But it was hers. Every piece, every choice, every decision. Hers. Her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. Dr. Harper, this is Patricia Sterling. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for how things turned out. You were good for my son and he was a fool to let you go. I hope you find happiness in your new life. Natasha stared at the message for a long time, surprised by the gesture. She typed back a simple response. Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. She didn't expect them to be friends. But the acknowledgement mattered. Someone from that family recognized her value, even if it came too late to save the marriage. As the sun set outside her windows, Natasha made a decision. Tomorrow she would call Antoine and Beverly. They would meet and together they would start planning. Harper Consulting or maybe Harper Financial Solutions. Her company. Her rules. Her future. For the first time in 5 years, Natasha fell asleep with a smile on her face, excited about what tomorrow might bring. Julian sat in his home office, the space feeling cavernous and empty without Natasha's quiet presence in the house. Papers were scattered across his desk, emails he tried to answer but couldn't focus on, business proposals that no longer seemed important. Simone had been understanding at first. She'll come around, she'd said. Ex-wives always do when they realize what they're giving up. But weeks had passed and Natasha hadn't come around. Instead, she dismantled his family's business operations with surgical precision, negotiated a settlement that cost more than Julian wanted to think about, and disappeared completely into her new life. His phone rang. His mother. "Julian, we need to talk about Thanksgiving," Patricia said, her voice strained. "Your father thinks we should still have the family gathering, but I'm not sure that's wise given everything that's happened." "It's fine, Mom. We'll have Thanksgiving like we always do." "Will you bring Simone?" The question hung in the air. Julian had been dreading it. "I don't know. Maybe." "Julian, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Do you actually love this girl, or are you just trying to recapture something from your past?" "I love her." "Are you sure? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you threw away a marriage to a woman who actually loved you for someone who's only interested in your money. That's not fair. You don't know Simone." "You're right. I don't. But I knew Natasha, and I watched her support you, help your father's business, and make herself invisible so you could shine. And then I watched you discard her like she meant nothing. So forgive me if I'm skeptical about your judgment right now." After his mother hung up, Julian threw his phone across the room. It bounced off the leather couch and clattered to the floor. The truth was he wasn't sure anymore. About Simone, about his choices, about anything. Simone had moved into the mansion 3 weeks ago. At first, it had felt exciting, like they were finally getting their chance at the relationship they'd dreamed about in college. But reality was different from memory. Simone complained about the neighborhood being too quiet. She wanted to go out constantly to expensive restaurants and trendy clubs. She talked about redecorating the house, getting rid of all of Natasha's choices and replacing them with her own taste. "It's creepy living in your ex-wife's space," she'd said one evening, looking around the living room with disdain. "We need to make it ours." But Julian found himself resistant to changing anything. Every time Simone suggested removing a piece of furniture or repainting a room, he made excuses. "Too expensive right now. Too much hassle. Maybe later." The truth was he didn't want to erase Natasha. And that realization troubled him more than he wanted to admit. At work things were barely better. His father still spoke to him, but their conversations were clipped and professional. Theodore avoided him unless absolutely necessary. The other employees seemed to know what had happened, and Julian could feel their judgment in their polite greetings and quick excuses to leave meetings early. He tried multiple times to reach Natasha. Calls, texts, even an email. All went unanswered. He'd driven past the hotel where she'd stayed, but she was long gone. He'd asked mutual acquaintances, but no one would tell him where she was. Beverly, who'd always been friendly at social events, had run into him at a coffee shop and looked right through him like he was invisible. "Beverly, please. I just need to know if she's okay," Julian had said. Beverly had stared at him coldly. "She's better than okay. She's thriving. And she's doing it without you, which I'm sure must be killing you since you told her she'd be nothing without your money and your name." Then she'd walked away, leaving Julian standing alone in line, feeling like everyone was staring at him. One evening in early November, Simone dropped her mask slightly. "Julian, we need to talk about money," she said over dinner. "What about it?" "Well, the settlement with your ex must have been expensive. And I've noticed you've been saying no to things lately. Trips I want to take, renovations I want to do. Are we having financial problems?" "We're fine." "Are you sure? Because I gave up my apartment to move in here, and I need to know if this is stable or if I should have kept my lease." Julian set down his fork. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need security. I came back because I thought we'd have a life together. A good life. But if you're having money troubles, I need to know. And if I was having money troubles? Would you leave?" Simone hesitated just long enough to give Julian his answer. "Of course not," she said quickly. "I love you. I'm just being practical." But the doubt was there now, planted and growing. The following week, Julian ran into Theodore at the office. "Can we talk?" Julian asked. Theodore glanced at his watch. "I have 5 minutes." They sat in Theodore's office, an awkward silence stretching between them. "I know I messed up," Julian began. "With Natasha. With everything." "Yes, you did. I just want to know how to fix it." Theodore leaned back in his chair. "You can't. That's the thing you don't seem to understand, Julian. Some things once broken can't be fixed. You can't unsay the things you said to her. You can't undo the years of taking her for granted. You certainly can't expect her to forgive you just because you've realized what you lost. So what do? You move forward. You live with your choices. And hopefully you learn from them. That's it. That's it." Thanksgiving came, and it was the most uncomfortable family gathering Julian could remember. His parents were polite but distant. Simone tried too hard to fit in, complimenting everything and everyone in ways that felt insincere. Julian's grandmother, a sharp woman in her 80s, spent most of the dinner watching Simone with obvious disapproval. "Where's Natasha?" his grandmother asked at one point, her voice loud in the quiet dining room. "She and Julian are separated, grandmother," Patricia said gently. "That's a shame. I like that girl. She had a good head on her shoulders." The old woman looked at Simone. "What do you do, dear?" "I'm a model," Simone said proudly. "And what happens when you get old?" The conversation died after that. Later, Julian found his grandmother in the library. "You made a mistake," she said without preamble. "That Natasha girl was smart. This new one is just pretty." "It's not that simple, grandmother." "It's exactly that simple. You got bored with having everything, so you threw away the best thing you had to chase something shiny. And now you're realizing that shiny isn't the same as valuable." Julian wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. December brought Christmas preparations, and with them, more evidence that his life had become a carefully constructed facade. Simone wanted an elaborate party. Julian's mother politely declined to help organize it, citing being too busy. His father was even more direct. "I'm not hosting a party to celebrate you dumping your wife." The party they ended up having was small and awkward. A few of Julian's college friends came, most of whom Simone had invited. They drank too much and talked about the old days in ways that made Julian feel ancient and foolish. One of his friends, Kevin, pulled him aside late in the evening. "Man, are you okay? You seem off." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been miserable all night. Aunt Simone keeps looking at you like she's trying to figure out how much you're worth." "That's not true." Kevin shrugged. "Whatever you say. But your ex-wife never looked at you that way. She looked at you like you were important, not like you were an investment." After everyone left, Julian found Simone going through papers in his office. "What are you doing?" he asked, more sharply than he'd intended. She jumped, dropping the folder she'd been holding. "I was just looking for a pen." "In my filing cabinet?" "I didn't think it was a big deal. We're living together. What's yours is mine, right? We're not married, Simone." "Not yet." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "But we could be. That's where this is heading, isn't it?" Julian looked at the woman he'd thought he wanted, seeing her clearly for the first time. The calculation in her eyes. The way she'd positioned herself in his home, in his life. The constant talk about money and security. "I need to think," he said quietly. "Think about what?" "About everything." He left his office and walked through the mansion that suddenly felt like a museum. A showcase of someone else's life. Nothing felt real or right anymore. His phone buzzed with a notification. An article in a business magazine. Rising Stars in Financial Consulting. Dr. Natasha Harper's innovative approach to international market analysis. Julian clicked on it and read about Natasha's new consulting firm, about the clients she'd already signed, about her reputation as a brilliant strategist who could see patterns others missed. The article mentioned that she'd recently completed her PhD but had taken time away from consulting to focus on family. "But now she's back," the article concluded, "and the financial world is better for it." There was a photo of Natasha in her office, which looked bright and modern. She was smiling at the camera, genuinely happy. Her office had a wall of bookshelves filled with academic texts and journals. She looked successful, confident, free. Julian realized with sudden, crushing clarity that she didn't need him. She never had. He'd been the one who needed her, who'd been made better by her presence, who'd relied on her intelligence and support without ever acknowledging it. And he'd thrown it all away for a woman who was already eyeing the exits. He called his mother. "I think I made a terrible mistake," he said when she answered. "I know you did, sweetheart. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know if there's anything I can do. Probably not with Natasha. That ship has sailed. But you can stop making the same mistake over and over. You can learn something from this. After hanging up, Julian sat in the dark mansion, alone with his regrets and his choices, finally understanding what freedom really cost. 3 months after walking out of the mansion, Natasha sat in her office, a renovated space above a bookstore in a trendy part of the city. The walls were lined with white shelves holding her books and research materials. Her desk faced the large windows overlooking the street below. Everything was organized, efficient, and entirely her own. Beverly walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder. "Your 2 o'clock call to confirm," Beverly said, settling into the chair across from Natasha's desk. "And Carter's team sent over the final report on the Singapore project. They're thrilled with the results." "Good. That'll help with referrals." Beverly and Natasha had officially partnered 3 weeks earlier, forming Harper Consulting Solutions. Beverly handled operations and client relations while Natasha focused on the strategic work. They'd signed 4 clients already, with 3 more in negotiation. "I have news," Beverly said, her expression carefully neutral. "Patricia Sterling called me." Natasha looked up from her computer. "Why?" "She wants to hire us." "Well, hire you specifically." "She's starting a charitable foundation focused on women's education and wants help structuring the financial side." "Absolutely not. I told her you'd probably say that." "But she's offering very generous terms, and she emphasized multiple times that this has nothing to do with Julian. She's using her own money, separate from the Sterling family accounts." Natasha considered it. Patricia had always been kind to her, and women's education was a cause Natasha cared about deeply. But working with anyone connected to Julian felt complicated. "Let me think about it," she finally said. "Take your time. She's not in a rush." That evening, Natasha had dinner with Antoine and his partner Tyler, a kind man who taught high school history. They met at a small Italian restaurant near Antoine's office. "The loft is looking great," Tyler said. Antoine showed me pictures. "Very modern." "Thanks. It's starting to feel like home." "Speaking of which," Antoine said, "Tyler and I have been talking. We're thinking of buying a house together. Something with space for a home office and maybe eventually a family." Natasha smiled. "That's wonderful. Are you scared?" "Terrified," Tyler admitted. "But the good kind of terrified. Like jumping out of a plane knowing your parachute will open." "That's how I felt walking out of the mansion," Natasha said. "Scared but certain I'd land safely." "And did you?" Antoine asked. "I'm still landing, but yes. I think I did." After dinner, walking back to her loft, Natasha's phone rang. An unknown number. "Dr. Harper? This is Richard Sterling." Natasha stopped walking. "Mr. Sterling. This is unexpected. I know we agreed to minimal contact, but I wanted to reach out personally. Not about business. About my son. I'm not interested in discussing Julian. I understand. But I need you to know something. He's miserable. The woman he left you for has been bleeding him dry, and he's finally starting to realize what he lost. I don't expect you to care, but I wanted you to know that we all know you were the best thing that ever happened to this family." Natasha felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction. Sadness. Mostly just tired resignation. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Sterling. But Julian made his choice. I'm not responsible for his happiness or his misery anymore." "I know. I just thought you should hear it from me. You were family to us and we failed you. I'm sorry for that." After hanging up, Natasha continued walking, processing the conversation. Part of her wanted to feel vindicated. "See, I was valuable. You all realize it now." But mostly she just felt relief that she was no longer part of that drama. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she did recognize this time. Dominic Russell, a history professor at the local university. They'd met at a lecture series 3 weeks ago and had been on 2 coffee dates since then. "Still on for tomorrow's museum visit?" "Absolutely," she texted back. "Looking forward to it." Dominic was different from Julian in every way that mattered. He was passionate about his work but not consumed by it. He asked Natasha about her research and actually listened to her answers. He'd never once mentioned her appearance before her intelligence. When she told him about her recent divorce, he'd simply nodded and said, "His loss, certainly." Their museum visit the next day turned into a 6-hour conversation spanning art, history, finance, and everything in between. They had lunch at the museum cafe, then coffee at a shop nearby, neither of them wanting the day to end. "I have to admit something," Dominic said as they finally parted ways. I googled you after we first met. Natasha laughed. And I'm intimidated as hell by your credentials. But also impressed. And definitely interested in continuing to get to know you. The feeling is mutual. They made plans for dinner the following week, something more formal than coffee or museum wandering. Natasha found herself looking forward to it in a way she hadn't looked forward to anything romantic in years. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian was having his own reckoning. He'd come home from work to find Simone packing. "What's going on?" he asked. "I can't do this anymore," she said, not meeting his eyes. "This isn't what I thought it would be." "I mean, you're broke, Julian. Or close enough to it that it makes no difference. That settlement with your ex wiped you out. Your father's cutting back your salary. This house is mortgaged to the ceiling. I didn't sign up for this. So you're leaving because I don't have enough money? I'm leaving because you lied to me. You made it sound like you were wealthy, like we'd have this amazing life together. But the truth is, your ex-wife was the one holding everything together, and without her, you're just an average guy with an expensive house you can't afford." Julian felt numb. "I never lied to you. Maybe not directly. But you let me believe things that weren't true. And now I'm done wasting my time." She left that evening, taking the jewelry he'd bought her and leaving behind everything else. Julian sat in the empty mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture that suddenly looked ridiculous and oversized, and finally understood what Natasha must have felt all those years. Invisible. Unvalued. Just a prop in someone else's story. The next morning he called his father. "I want to sell the house," he said. "Thank God," Richard replied. "I was wondering when you'd come to your senses. That place is bleeding money you don't have. I've been thinking about a lot of things. About Natasha. About how I treated her. And I want to apologize to her. Really apologize. Not because I want her back, because I know that's not possible. But because she deserves to hear it." Richard was quiet for a moment. "I'll see what I can do." 1 week later, Julian received a message through Leonard, Natasha's lawyer. She was willing to meet for coffee one time in a public place to hear what he had to say. They met at a cafe Natasha chose, neutral territory. She arrived first, wearing a blue sweater and jeans, looking relaxed and happy. Julian felt underdressed in his business suit. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting across from her. "You have 30 minutes, Natasha replied, checking her watch. "I have a client call after this." Julian took a breath. "I'm sorry. Not the general sorry I've been saying, but specifically sorry. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I'm sorry I took credit for work you did. I'm sorry I told you you'd be nothing without me when the truth is I'm the one who was nothing without you. You were the reason Sterling Enterprises succeeded these past 5 years, and I was too blind and too arrogant to see it." Natasha listened without interrupting. "I'm not asking for another chance," Julian continued. "I know I don't deserve one. I'm not even asking for forgiveness, though I'd like that someday. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I lost. And I'm sorry it took losing you for me to finally wake up." "Okay," Natasha said quietly. "Okay. I hear your apology. I appreciate it. Thank you for being honest. That's it. What else do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That I'm glad you finally figured it out? Julian, I spent 5 years of my life being your silent partner, your invisible support system. I'm not going to spend another minute helping you feel better about your choices." She wasn't angry. That was what struck Julian most. She wasn't angry or hurt or emotional. She was just done. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I'm getting there. I have my own business. I'm doing work I love. I'm building a life that's entirely mine. So yes, I'm happy. Or I will be once I stop having conversations about the past." She stood, gathering her bag. "I hope you figure things out, Julian. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. But I can't be part of that journey, and I don't want to be. Take care of yourself." She walked out of the cafe, out of his life, with the same quiet dignity she'd shown when she walked out of his house months earlier. Julian sat alone with his coffee, feeling the finality of it, and understood that this was his rock bottom. Not losing his money or his house or Simone. Losing Natasha and finally understanding what he'd lost. It was time to rebuild. Not his marriage or his past, but himself. For the first time since the divorce started, Julian felt something like hope. Not hope that Natasha would come back. But hope that maybe, eventually, he could become someone worthy of the lesson she'd taught him. 6 months after leaving Julian, Natasha stood in the conference room of Harper Consulting Solutions, presenting to a potential client. The room was sleek and professional, with a long table, comfortable chairs, and a wall of windows overlooking the city. Our analysis shows that entering the Vietnamese market now, before the projected infrastructure boom, would position your company for significant growth over the next 5 years, Natasha explained, clicking through her presentation. However, the key is identifying the right local partners and understanding the regulatory environment. The client, a tech company CEO named Frank Morrison, nodded along, clearly impressed. This is exactly the kind of insight we needed, Frank said. How soon can you start? We can have a team assembled by next week, Beverly chimed in from her seat at the table. Dr. Harper will lead the analysis, and we'll provide monthly progress reports. After the clients left, Beverly high-fived Natasha. That's our biggest contract yet, Beverly said. We're officially a real consulting firm now. We've been a real firm for months. I know, but this feels different. This is the kind of client that leads to more clients. The kind that puts us on the map. Natasha smiled. She'd been building toward this moment systematically. Each successful project led to referrals. Each satisfied client brought more opportunities. Her reputation was growing, based entirely on her own merit and work. Her phone buzzed. Antoine, can you stop by the house tonight? Tyler and I want to show you something. Sure. What time? 7 works. That evening, Natasha drove to Antoine and Tyler's new house, a charming craftsman in a family-friendly neighborhood. They'd moved in 2 months earlier and had been slowly renovating. Close your eyes, Antoine said when she arrived. Really? Just do it. He led her through the house to what had been a spare bedroom. Okay, open. The room had been transformed into a home office. There was a desk by the window, built-in bookshelves along one wall, and comfortable seating in the corner. It's your office, Tyler explained. For when you need to work from here or just want a quiet place away from your own office. We wanted you to have space in our home. Natasha felt her eyes well up. You guys didn't have to do this. Your family, Antoine said simply. This is what family does. She hugged them both, overwhelmed by the gesture. Later, sitting in their living room with wine and takeout, Tyler asked, Are you seeing anyone? Antoine said there was a professor guy. Dominic. We've been dating for a few months now. And it's nice. Easy. He respects what I do. We have good conversations. He doesn't try to change me or make me smaller to make himself feel bigger. That's a low bar, Antoine observed. Maybe. But it's a bar my ex-husband couldn't clear, so I'm not taking it for granted. Fair point. When do we get to meet him? Soon. We're taking things slow, but it's heading somewhere good, I think. The following week, Natasha spoke at a conference on international market analysis. It was her first major speaking engagement since leaving Julian, and she was nervous about being back in the public eye. But as she stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of several hundred financial professionals, she felt a sense of rightness. This was where she belonged. Not behind her husband at dinner parties, not silently supporting someone else's career. Here in the spotlight, sharing her expertise. Her presentation was well received. Afterwards, multiple people approached her with business cards and consulting requests. One woman, a CFO named Diane, was particularly enthusiastic. I've been following your career since your dissertation was published, Diane said. I'm so glad to see you consulting again. We were all wondering where you'd gone. I took some time away, Natasha said diplomatically. Well, we're glad you're back. The field needs more women like you. That evening, Dominic took Natasha to dinner to celebrate. You were amazing today, he said. I watched your presentation online. The way you explained those complex concepts so clearly, it was impressive. You watched online? Of course. I told you I'd be there in spirit even if I couldn't make it in person. They'd been dating for 4 months now, and Natasha was surprised by how comfortable it felt. Dominic was smart but not competitive. Successful but not obsessed with status. He asked about her work because he was genuinely interested, not because he was calculating how it affected him. I need to tell you something, Natasha said. About my ex-husband. Okay. He's wealthy. Or his family is. And when we divorced, it was complicated. There was a lot of money involved, a lot of drama. I just want you to know that going in. Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. I don't care about your ex or his money. I care about you. The woman who gets excited talking about currency markets. Who quotes economic theorists during pillow talk. Who is brilliant and driven and still learning to believe in herself again. That was quite a speech. I'm a professor. Speeches are my thing. He smiled. But I mean it, Natasha. I'm not here for your past or your ex-husband's money. I'm here for you. 2 months later, Harper Consulting Solutions moved into a larger office space. They'd outgrown the loft above the bookstore and needed room for the staff they were hiring. The new space had individual offices, a conference room, and a small kitchen area. Beverly hired a receptionist, a sharp young woman named Claire. Antoine designed custom furniture for the space. Tyler helped them set up an impressive library of business and economic texts. On their first day in the new office, Natasha stood by the windows, looking out at the city. "We did it," Beverly said, coming to stand beside her. "We actually built something real." "We did. Do you ever regret it? Walking away from all that sterling money?" Natasha thought about it honestly. "No, not once. That money came with strings attached. It came with being invisible. This." She gestured to the office around them. "This is ours. We built it ourselves. No one can take it away or tell us we didn't earn it." As fall turned to winter, Natasha's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was challenging but rewarding. Her relationship with Dominic was progressing naturally. Her friendship with Beverly was stronger than ever. Antoine and Tyler had become her family in ways that Julian's family never truly had been. She still got the occasional message from Patricia Sterling, who she'd eventually agreed to work with on the educational foundation. They maintained a professional relationship, carefully separate from the Sterling family drama. One evening in December, almost a full year after leaving Julian, Natasha attended a charity gala. It was a fundraiser for women in STEM, a cause she'd agreed to support. She wore a red dress, simple and elegant, and went alone because Dominic was out of town at a conference. She was networking with other attendees when she saw Julian across the room. He looked different. Older maybe. Certainly more humble. He was standing alone, not holding court the way he used to. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod of acknowledgement but didn't approach. Natasha turned back to her conversation, feeling nothing more than mild curiosity about what had become of him. Later, as she was leaving, she found Patricia by the coat check. "Natasha, it's good to see you," Patricia said warmly. "You too, Patricia. The foundation work is going well. Thanks to you. The structure you created is solid." Patricia paused. "Julian is here tonight. I saw him. He's different now. Humbler. Working hard to rebuild. He sold the mansion, moved into an apartment, got serious about his career instead of coasting on the family name. I'm glad he's figuring things out. He asks about you sometimes. Not in a creepy way. Just wanting to know you're okay." "I'm okay. Better than okay." Patricia smiled. "I can see that. You're glowing. Is it the work or is there someone?" "Both maybe. I'm just happy. Finally." "You deserve that happiness." As Natasha walked out into the winter night, wrapped in her coat against the cold, she felt a deep sense of peace. Julian was rebuilding his life. Good for him. She genuinely hoped he found whatever he was looking for. But his journey was no longer connected to hers. She had her own path now, her own success, her own joy. She'd built an empire not of money or status, but of self-respect and independence. And that was worth more than any mansion or family name could ever be. 2 years after walking out of the mansion with nothing but her car keys and her dignity, Natasha stood in the penthouse office of Harper Consulting Solutions. The company had grown beyond her wildest expectations. They now employed 15 people, had offices in 2 cities, and had just been featured in Forbes as one of the top emerging consulting firms in the nation. Beverly walked in carrying champagne in 2 glasses. "To us," Beverly said, pouring. 2 years of kicking ass and taking names." "To us," Natasha echoed, clinking glasses. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Beverly asked. "We didn't just build a company. We built something that matters. Half our clients are women-owned businesses or companies focused on social impact. We're not just making money. We're making a difference. That's because you insisted we have values beyond profit. And you made sure those values were economically sustainable. We're a good team." They were. The partnership worked because they respected each other's strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. Beverly handled the people side of the business while Natasha focused on strategy and analysis. Neither tried to control or diminish the other. That evening, Natasha had dinner with Dominic at their favorite Italian restaurant. They'd been together for over a year now, and the relationship had evolved from exciting and new to comfortable and solid. "I have something to tell you," Dominic said over dessert. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Just big. I've been offered a position at Stanford. Visiting professor for 2 years with possibility of becoming permanent." Natasha set down her fork. "California. California. I know it's across the country. I know you have your business here. I'm not asking you to uproot your life for me. But I'm hoping we can figure something out. Because I love you and I don't want to lose what we have. They talked through dinner and into the evening, walking the city streets as they discussed options. Long distance. Regular flights back and forth. Maybe eventually expanding Harper Consulting to the West Coast. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, Dominic said as they stood outside Natasha's apartment building. I just wanted you to know what I was thinking. That this is serious enough for me to want to find a way to make it work. I love you too, Natasha said, the words feeling natural and true. Let me think about it. Talk to Beverly. Figure out what's possible. They kissed goodnight, and Natasha went upstairs to her apartment, which she'd upgraded 6 months earlier to a larger space with a better view. She made tea and sat by the window thinking through her options. The truth was she could work from anywhere. Her reputation was established. Her business was solid. Beverly could handle the East Coast office while Natasha explored opportunities on the West Coast. The thought of moving, of starting over again in a new city should have been scary. But instead it felt like possibility. Her phone rang. Antoine. Hey, are you busy? He asked. Just thinking. What's up? Tyler and I have news. We're adopting. A little girl, 3 years old. We meet her next week. Natasha felt tears spring to her eyes. Antoine, that's wonderful. I know. I'm terrified. But also excited. And I wanted you to be one of the first to know because you're going to be her aunt, and we need you in her life. They talked for an hour about the adoption, about preparations, about hopes and fears. After hanging up, Natasha felt a deep sense of contentment. Her family was growing, not through obligation or marriage but through choice and love. The next morning, she met with Beverly to discuss the California opportunity. You should go, Beverly said immediately. But the company? We'll be fine. Better than fine. We can open a West Coast office. You can fly back once a month for management meetings. Natasha, we built this business to give us freedom, not to trap us. If you want to move to California to be with Dominic, we'll make it work. Are you sure? I'm sure. Besides, California has a huge market we haven't tapped yet. This could be a smart business move disguised as a romantic one. They spent the next week planning. By the end of it, they had a solid strategy for expansion. Harper Consulting Solutions would maintain its headquarters on the East Coast but open a satellite office in San Francisco. Natasha would split her time, spending 3 weeks a month in California and 1 week back east. She called Dominic with the news. You're sure? He asked. I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure. This is what I want. You, the adventure, the opportunity to grow the business. All of it. 3 weeks later, Natasha attended a charity gala for Patricia Sterling's Educational Foundation. It was their annual fundraiser, and Natasha was being honored for her work in structuring the foundation's financial strategy. Patricia met her at the entrance. You look radiant. California agrees with you. I'm happy. Really happy. That's wonderful. And thank you again for all your work with the foundation. We've been able to fund scholarships for 50 young women this year because of the structure you created. That means a lot to me. During the cocktail hour, Natasha found herself face to face with Julian. It was the first time they'd been in the same room in over a year. Congratulations on your award, he said. Thank you. How have you been? Good. Better. Working hard, trying to be better. He paused. I saw the Forbes article about your company. I'm proud of you. I know that probably sounds strange coming from me, but I am. It doesn't sound strange. Thank you. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. I'm sorry, Julian said quietly. I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for not seeing your value when I had the chance. I'm sorry for making you feel invisible. I'm sorry for all of it. I know. And I forgive you, Julian. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger. Life is too short to hold grudges. Are you happy? I am. Very happy. Good. That's good. He smiled, and for the first time since their divorce, it looked genuine. Take care of yourself, Natasha. You too. She watched him walk away, feeling nothing but mild goodwill. He was a chapter in her life that had closed. Not forgotten, but no longer relevant to her present or future. Later, accepting her award on stage, Natasha looked out at the audience and saw Patricia smiling proudly. She saw Beverly and Antoine and Tyler sitting together, her chosen family supporting her. She saw colleagues and clients and people whose lives she'd touched through her work. 2 years ago, I walked away from a life that looked perfect on the outside but felt hollow on the inside, Natasha said in her acceptance speech. I walked away from wealth and status and security, and people told me I was making a mistake. But I've learned something important. True security doesn't come from depending on someone else's resources. It comes from believing in your own capability. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in relationships that nurture you, work that fulfills you, and the freedom to be authentically yourself. The applause was enthusiastic, but more importantly, Natasha meant every word. After the gala, she flew back to California, where Dominic picked her up from the airport. "How was it?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. "Perfect. Closure. Moving forward." She kissed him. "I'm ready to start the next chapter." They drove to the apartment they'd started sharing, a bright space in Pacific Heights with views of the bay. Dominic had unpacked the last of her boxes while she was gone, organizing her books and setting up her home office. "Welcome home," he said, showing her the space. Home. The word resonated through Natasha like a bell. Not the mansion she'd left behind, not even the lofts and apartments she'd lived in since. This life she'd built from nothing. This relationship based on mutual respect. This career she'd forged through her own efforts. This was home. That weekend, Natasha video called with Beverly to discuss a new potential client. "Before we talk business," Beverly said, "I need to tell you something. We got a message today from Sterling Enterprises. They want to hire us." Natasha laughed. "That's ironic. Right? What do you want to do?" "Take the meeting. Treat them like any other potential client. If the project makes sense for us, we'll take it. If not, we'll pass. I'm not letting my past dictate our business decisions. You've come a long way, friend." "We both have." 3 months later, Natasha stood on a beach in Northern California, the wind whipping her hair around her face. Dominic was beside her, his arm around her shoulders. They were watching the sunset, orange and gold spreading across the sky. "I've been thinking," Dominic said, "about the future. About us." Yeah. "And I know we've both been hurt before. I know we're both cautious about making promises. But I'm ready if you are. Not rushing into anything but heading somewhere intentional." Natasha leaned into him, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of betrayal. The courage to walk away. The hard work of rebuilding. The joy of rediscovering herself. "I'm ready," she said. "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." Because that was the gift Julian had inadvertently given her. By telling her she'd be nothing without him, by forcing her to prove him wrong, he'd helped her discover who she really was. She was Dr. Natasha Harper. Financial engineer. Business owner. Partner, friend, sister, soon-to-be aunt. Strong, capable, independent, and free. And she'd built that life entirely on her own terms. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and Natasha smiled, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.